Hello and welcome to this episode of Sense Making in a Changing World podcast. My name is Morag and I'm delighted to be joined by the brilliant community innovator and urban street gardening powerhouse, Emma Cutting from Inner Melbourne today. She's the founder of the Heart Gardening Project and also the Melbourne Pollinator Corridor, an Australian first initiative that stretches along the Birrarung, the Yarra River, from the Royal Botanic Gardens in Melbourne to Westgate Park. This is a community-driven wildlife corridor focusing on rewilding the streets to create habitat for native bees and other native pollinating insects. It's been designed within the local council constraints with over 20 scientists and specialists. And it's about bringing nature into cities, treating nature like a close friend and giving love to the neglected nature strips in inner Melbourne. The Sense Making in a Changing World podcast is hosted by the Permaculture Education Institute. The Institute's all about teaching permaculture teachers and hosting a global permaculture graduate learning community, coincidentally called the Permaculture Hive. But before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the unceded lands in which I'm speaking with you. I'm here on the land of the Gubbi Gubbi people and pay my deep respect to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to recognise their care for this land, the waters, the biodiversity for so many, many thousands of years. So come on in. I hope you enjoy this conversation with the wonderful Emma Cutting. Make sure to check out the show notes for links to her work, where to find her book, and also how to support the crowdfunder for the Melbourne Pollinator Corridor. There's also a copy of the transcript and more information about our work here at the Permaculture Education Institute. Oh, and make sure to subscribe so you get notification of these weekly podcast episodes. And I'd love for you to leave us a lovely 5-star review too. It really does help the bots find our little podcast. And please feel free to go ahead and share this show with a friend. All right, it's my pleasure now to welcome Emma Cutting. Well, today on the show, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Emma Cutting. Emma Cutting is the founder and creator and protagonist of the Heart Gardening Project, and also extending from that, a new project that she's working on called the Melbourne Pollinator Corridor. Welcome, Emma, to the show today.
Hello, Morag. It is divine to be here.
Look, I'm so excited about this chance to speak with you about this project because, as you know, I grew up in Melbourne, and this work that you're doing in Melbourne just makes my heart sing because it's such an important part of rewilding and bringing life back into the heart of the city. So maybe before we talk about the Pollinator Project, possibly could we talk, or the Pollinator Corridor, could we talk a bit more about where all of this work started from? Like, what is the core of the Heart Gardening Project? What is it, and what made you start this work? It's an extraordinary work.
Okay. I first started street gardening back in 2015-16, and that came out of the fact that we just didn't have any land to garden in. I could not put my hands into soil. At that point, I'd just come out of 12 years of having chronic fatigue syndrome, and I was really kind of entering back into society, really. And so I built the first one, and while I was doing that, you know, I looked around and saw and this was in what's called a tree pit or a tree square. So it's a cutout into the asphalt. And I looked around. I could remember this moment where I looked up the road and saw all these spaces that were just nothing around these trees. I went, what can we do here? What if we did something here? Surely there is a lot of potential. And then, you know, at this point, you know, my background mainly is I'm a piano teacher. I'm a pianist. So, you know, I started looking at this from a honeybee perspective and going, okay, so what about we create forage for honeybees? Of course, that is very important, and I still believe that. But, you know, as I researched more and more and started creating, you know, more gardens up the road, I realised I learned about native bees and went, you've got to be joking. We've got native bees in Australia. We've got it's estimated to be about 2,000 species. And I didn't know about this. How could I not have known about this? I grew up on a farm. What? So that kind of led me down. I got native bee lessons. I started really reaching out to a lot of specialists and scientists and going, well, if I'm going to do this, let's do it, as to the best I can possibly do it. And so I can have the best chance of success. That one thing led to another, big site across the road, which felt like it wasn't far, but it was a whole different realm. And a lot of challenges came up there, but also a lot of incredible reaction from the community, positive reaction from the community. That blew me away. I went, we're onto something here. This is a no-brainer. And that's where I think it went, this reaction of people wanting to connect around gardening in a public space where you're doing something, but you can also have a chat. You're doing something positive and you're going to have a chat not only about the world, but you can have a chat about the garden. And it's a real kind of, generally, it's a safe place. It's a safe topic to talk about. So it actually I could see this connection. And of course, I actually learned through street gardening that I'm an extrovert. I didn't know this about myself because I'd been sick for so many years. And before that, I was homeschooled, and there was nothing, that's not a bad thing at all, but it was different. I was, piano. I went to the so the conservatorium, went to uni early. So it was just this like different upbringing of, and playing the piano is pretty isolating in general. I just started learning this about myself and I went, okay, this is really interesting. It was really amazing for me. So I suppose with one of the sites, when one of the challenges came up when work had to stop, another person down the road said, would you help me with my patch? I went, aha, yes, absolutely. And I think from that point, that was where the Heart Gardening Project really started, because I saw that it wasn't enough, putting all your eggs in one basket. It wasn't enough, because if something happened to that site, because I did everything right, I did everything I could to have that those gardens happen, and they're still there, but it was it was a long haul. It's to cast your net wide. So if something happens to one, right, we find another garden somewhere else and we do it there, or we go and talk to the neighbour. And that was where,
So in terms of getting your garden started, so it's by people seeing it, noticing it when they're in your street. I think, are you in South Melbourne? Is that what you said? So they're seeing that. But how else have you been sharing the story about what you're doing? You have a website and you're going on to different kind of media, and how has that helped to spark interest? Like, have you seen it kind of ripple out in different ways, or is it mostly just they see it, they feel it, and then they think, yes, that's what I want to do as well?
That's a really good question. I would say, again, through the challenges from one of the gardens, I went, okay, well, it's got to go all online. I had signs up. I had signs around design and why I'm doing this. What are the choices around this? Why does this garden look the way it does? What were the challenges around this garden? Because every street garden, as any gardener would know really, any street garden, any site, it can be a metre away from another site, and it's totally different.
Mm-hmm.
So having those signs were, it was really working with people, but those went and I went, okay, well, I've got to put it all online. So I spent 3 weeks channeling, I do a lot of this, channel frustration into positive action. And I started a website and I learned how to build a website. And so that happened. I think the ripple effects from that have been, you don't kind of know the ripple effects until you talk to someone someone approached me at the day and said they'd really like to volunteer, and they said, "Oh, we actually did we did an assignment. I'm at the University of Tasmania, and we did an assignment on you." It's like, really? Okay. That's great. Can I see? I'd love to see it. Oh, look, it wasn't that good. Oh, I don't care. I'd just love to see it. That's amazing. So you hear that. But also I've never been a social media person, but my husband said, you must do Instagram. You've got to do this. You've got to do this. Mm-hmm. I love Instagram. So it's kind of like this, it's a bit of a journal for me, actually. I go back a lot and go, I had that thought. What was that thinking that I had that day? Or what was that word that I made up that day? And so the Instagram for me it's been a lovely experience.
Well, that's a great way of using it. I think that's fantastic. Like as a journal, like you can go back to and look at the evolution of the projects, and I think that's brilliant. Yeah, that's a fantastic way of using it.
Well, it's worked for me, and that's other social media platforms have not worked for me as far as mental health goes. Yeah. And this one does. So I think the ripple effects I can see a lot clearer, I think, with Insta. And that has been, I have been able to reach out, actually, to people like you, Morag.
Yes.
That's the thing. It's actually it's been, it just feels like you can kind of get to know someone a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's a safe space for me. So, I've had, there's been trolls on there and everything, but it's still a safe place. And so I'm
Excuse me. So tell me then, from the Heart Guarding Project, now you're moving into this new space. And it's kind of obviously bringing forth all the things that you've been talking about since the beginning. But the Melbourne Pollinator Corridor, I mean, this is kind of expanding quite significantly from the square and the asphalt in front of your place. Tell us a little bit about what is the Melbourne Pollinator Project and how it came about.
Well, it came about because I was helping, so far the Heart Gardening Project has helped to create over 70 street gardens, and we've planted over 6,000 plants, which, to some might not sound a lot, but when you're looking at all these little patches in a very urban environment, a very sealed environment, it does add up to a lot of different gardens. And we've given a lot of pollinator-loving plants away as well, over 600 over the last couple of years. And I think through all the conversations, which must be in the thousands now, around from local, but also around Australia, and then I've consulted with over 30 scientists and specialists. All of that has been, that experience and that knowledge has gone into the design and the setup. And now the creation of the Melbourne Pollinator Corridor, which is it's really exciting, actually. It's an 8-kilometre, or will be when it's finished. It will be an 8-kilometre wildlife corridor for native bees and other native pollinating insects, and it's community-led and maintained, and it will be linking two really large green patches along the Birrarung, Royal Botanic Gardens, Melbourne, and Westgate Park. And this is what we're aiming for is 200 gardens, 18,000 Indigenous plants in the ground, and we're looking at doing all this in the next couple of years. Mm. The big thing is this will be done. It can be done without funding. It can be done, slowly, because street gardening begets street gardening, so it will happen. However, we want this to really happen faster because it needs to happen faster. So what we're trying to do, this is an Australian first initiative. So we're really trying to get to prove out this concept little bit by little bit. So micro communities we're taking, it might seem like a really large space, but actually if you take it, we're looking at micro communities and building up, I've called it a hub, so large gardens with some smaller gardens around it. And then we're, deepening and strengthening and building that community, not only of humans, but also of plants and animals. Was strengthening that community, then we do another one, then we do another one. And that all comes from what I've noticed, works in the big gardens that we've done so far. And then linking those up.
Wow. I was looking at the maps because you've created a beautiful book explaining what this concept is and how to do it and all this background knowledge. I mean, it's a brilliant book. I think it's a guide that everyone in Melbourne really needs to have in their hands and to, imagine if that kind of myceliated much, much further across the whole of Melbourne. I mean, 8 kilometres is just the beginning, I can imagine. But what I wanted to ask you, though, was about so you're talking about street gardens, but are you also looking at trying to encourage people to put it in their backyards, or is it in schools or workplaces? Like, and how are you negotiating that public space gardening? What response have you had from, say, local authorities in order to support this kind of work? How are you going with that?
There are many. I think there were about 3 questions. I'll try.
Sorry, that was a really big.
No, it's so good. It's so good. They're all such good questions as well. The first one, you were talking about different spaces, and there are so many different types of public spaces. And of course, we're looking at private as well. We're looking at a combination here. The big thing, I suppose, is looking at the public spaces that are barren, that are nature strips. Obviously, are a gold mine of positive change waiting to happen. And so that's been one of the huge things, but huge pieces of land, but there are so many others. There's public land that is not managed by council, that are managed by other authorities. And we've worked with the Department of Families and Fairness and Housing, for instance, and we've also there's kind of private public land as well. So we've built, created a garden on a car park, and then we've taken nature strips and we've taken 6 houses and, put that all together. And then as far as the local authorities go, look, it's been a real journey. If we're talking about council, for starters, it's been a real journey. And if I was to look outside of me and look at the situation, I'd say that though it's been very challenging, and I've led 3 campaigns around gardening on nature strips, and one's still going. Interestingly, I think council have helped me with these challenges. And I think they've helped a lot with the design of the Melbourne Pollinator Corridor. So my husband's a designer. So, he says, okay, constraints are what designers love. They thrive on constraints. I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to thrive on the constraints. And, so you get these constraints and you work around them or with them or within them. And that's the thing. So the MPC has been designed within local council constraints. So whether they ban street gardening or not, it doesn't matter. The MPC will go ahead, because one of the big things about it is it will flow. I should back it up and say, one of the quotes I've based a lot of my thinking on is a Bruce Lee quote, which is, "Be water, my friend." And so you flow around your obstacle. You flow within the obstacle. You become what you need it to be. And that, for me, I think about that probably daily, that quote.
I think that's such a beautiful way of expressing it, because I know a lot of people who are either doing, verge gardening, street gardening, community gardening are often coming up against these things. And I think that's really great advice. And it's something too that I think when we were starting Northey Street City Farm in Brisbane, over 25 years ago, that it was the same approach, I think, that got us through and was enabled us to kind of gradually open up doors and possibilities and to where it is now. And I think it's a fabulous way too, I think, to help you to stay in that generative space. And, otherwise you can end up throwing your hands up in the air and just think, oh no, like this is all too hard. So I think that's fantastic. Sorry, I should actually say as well, though, what I also did was I actually put council aside. I tried really, really, really hard for many years with council. And then I went, no. And I went, okay, let's see. And as soon as I did that, though, all these doors, all these doors opened up. And suddenly we've got amazing partners that want this to happen. Yeah.
We've got the Royal Botanic Gardens, Victoria, as a partner. We've got Westgate Biodiversity. Either end, we've got these people that want this to happen, that see the value in this, and not only I think for plants or for wildlife, but for humans as well.
I think that's very, very clever approach, in that you've approached people who have like a bigger, broader picture, and it's more, a more regional approach or a more global perspective on what's going on in terms of climate change or ecosystems and where they play a part. And what that does is, when you get players like that involved, it lifts everyone, and it kind of invites other people to come and play, or draws people along to come and play. It's like, oh, why aren't you getting involved in this? This is where we're playing now. It's like, come on, catch up.
Yeah, and that's absolutely, and that's been the thing around my thinking about street gardening and what street gardening is. It's kind of it's. I think I've done it enough now to see how easily scalable that idea is, which is to do as, it's different to guerrilla gardening for me. Guerrilla gardening is illegal. There is definitely a place for it. And there are definitely blurry lines between street gardening and guerrilla gardening. However, for me, street gardening is doing as much as is possible within the guidelines, and then doing as much as you possibly can, fill all the spaces with whatever you can, and then creating that positive pressure, that groundswell. And that was the thing with, the more gardens we created, the more people would see, and had no choice but to see, what could be done with these spaces. And of course, everyone reacts or engages to these gardens in their own way, in their own time, which is exactly what you want. And this is where that street gardening begets street gardening. It will happen. It does happen. The ripple effects are incredible. But then you'll have people going, I want to do a garden right now. Absolutely. And it's like, great, awesome. And then you'll get people, I want to help you do the garden. And then they'll watch, and then they'll go and try it. Or they'll just want to stop for a chat. And this is, I think, but I definitely think that if we just be in the community wanting to create change, I don't think that's enough, which is where all the scientists and the specialists and the organisations come in at different angles to create that pressure. And as you said, I love that, to give a lift. I really like that. That's a lovely, lovely image for me, to be able to keep going.
Yeah, and I think it's absolutely fantastic, because Oh, I'm going to have to chop this bit out, Snap, because really great response. And I just, as I was listening to you, I forgot what I was going to say. I'm back into Hang on, I'm just going to write a little note. Where are we? 36. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's what I was going to say.
Got a cough anyway. It's great.
Yeah, good. Okay, good. Cough and coffee break. What I really liked about how you have framed this project is, as you talked about, it's community-led, it's community-designed, there's these citizen design aspects to it, and that you were just saying about it being like just being a local community project is not enough. The fact that you've created a kind of a meta story, something that like it's this context that holds the imagination of what is possible for the future, and that it's a type of positive, what we call, through the permaculture world is, and particularly with the perma youth that came out of there, actually, the practivism is this positive, practical activism. And it's like, what are we doing this for? Like, what is the bigger picture of this? And you can see, I think, something around it being a pollinator corridor, about it being another species, about protecting and creating and rewilding the spaces for the more than human world in an urban area. I think this is, it holds something so precious in terms of how we can imagine a different future for our inner urban environments, because, like you said, they're so covered over, they're, devoid of, we've got these little pocket parks, but then in between, there's not that much going on. And so I think this idea of deeply engaging people in connecting with place, but not just connecting for themselves, it's connecting beyond. So it feels really vital, and in that vitality, that vitalizing kind of way. So can you speak a little bit more about how you are weaving in the citizen science or citizen design, or that whole becoming a citizen in this project? How does that all work for you?
Well, this is something we are absolutely working on right now. We're working on one of the things that the Heart Gardening Project wants to do, and this is thanks to council as well and all those the challenges, is that I've actually also gone, okay, we're doing this grassroots, absolutely, but I think we should also look at top down. And so that's external to the Heart Gardening Project, but internally to the Heart Gardening Project, we've actually been looking at the same thing. How do we grow from the bottom up? But we actually need to set up our governance really, really well. I must admit that, I've been working on this for 3 years in my own time, over 60 hours a week, easily. I can see, this is what drove me, is that moment outside our streets. Like, this needs to happen. It has to happen. It can happen. And that determination, I feel again now, where we're really at a point where we're just, we're looking to scale, and I can't mess up. I can't mess it up. So I really feel that sense of intense responsibility to do the right thing by this community, but also, to make sure that, partners and sponsors and donors, but also that we can prove out this concept. I don't even know if I answered your question, actually.
Oh, no, it's absolutely beautiful. And I wonder whether where does that deep spark, or what keeps you going with that? I mean, apart from, feeling responsible for it and starting this and putting all your energy, like, what fuels your flame? Like, you've written some beautiful quotes from, people like Robin Wall Kimmerer in your book, and, some of the things from David Attenborough as well about, rewilding the world and restoring, like, or is it something just personal, more about, you have a young child and, the future, or is it climate? Like, what are the things that kind of feed into your motivation for this? because it's a lot of effort that you're putting into this. Like you're putting your heart and soul into making this happen. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing that you're doing. And, I just think it's absolutely incredible. And I'm always curious to know what fuels people's flames. Like I feel like this fire burning inside me all the time, and that just keeps me going. And I, always curious to know what fuels other people's flames.
You've mentioned a lot of them already.
No,
you have. But I think what I want to say is that there's a lot that have kind of come together at the same time. My daughter would have to be there near the top. I think when I grew up on a farm, a beautiful farm in northern New South Wales, and I think that the farm itself was a friend to me. It was a place to escape to, and I loved just watching small things, taking time to watch the ants. My mum tells a story about me. They couldn't find me, and I was sitting there waiting for the chook to lay an egg because I wanted to see it, and I'd been waiting obviously for a while, and I was missing. So, but these were I wanted my daughter to have. We can't have chooks, and we can't do that in our place, in our rental, but I wanted her to have nature. And this is the way she's been able to have nature in her life. And I see it, and I see her talking about native bees, and I see her planting the plants and wanting to help and wanting to water, and us out in the laneway. And street gardening is a tough one with littlies, but we've got a laneway and we've been able to do that, and that has been so powerful for me. And I know also for her, she wrote the words, the Heart Gardening Project, the other day with the logo and the heart and the bee. I went, oh, okay, proud. Okay, that's really amazing. And that fuels me. Obviously, there's a big thing of, I've mentioned it before, channeling frustration. Just through the either the challenges from council or from whatever report has come out recently, or when I might hear David Attenborough speak. What is it? I think I've got this. I think I might have this right. We live our lives in the shadow of a disaster of our own making. Think about that one a lot. Live our comfortable lives. That's the thing. So it's actually live our comfortable lives. So it's actually being uncomfortable and being able to sit in that uncomfortableness and try and live a bit uncomfortably in order to create change, positive change. The other thing as well, the more, because I'm a teacher, I've actually found that I've been doing this, I talk about my daughter, but then I realised that I've been doing this for my students as well. And I look at the next generation, I look at this young generation, and I look at the amount of mental health problems and the huge issues that they are currently facing. And I go, I've got to do more. I have to do more. How can I do more for these beautiful, beautiful people that are intelligent and caring and trying so hard and just so on it, coming out with just amazing, amazing wisdom. How can I help them more? But really coming out of CFS, it's coming out of the chronic fatigue syndrome, was that was full on. That was the personal thing for me.
Yeah.
I really.
How did you come out of can I ask, like, how does one come out of chronic fatigue syndrome?
Well, I needed to accept it first. It took me a while to do that. And then I needed to accept it in a way that I didn't live with it, but I worked with how I could move out of it. I think when I got to the point of thinking the word, for me it worked, glacially. So a glacier moves slowly and is incredibly powerful. And if you're thinking about your body like a system, you can't just change one thing and expect everything else to fall into place. I must admit that Western medicine did not work at that point, especially that, and that's a while ago. There's a lot that's been learned about CFS since, but Chinese medicine really helped because it looked at the whole body. I also had to learn patience, which I'm still learning. but yeah, I really had to be patient. I had to have a good team. Not one thing was going to help, which interestingly, as I'm saying this, so interesting, it's exactly the same kind of tack I'm taking with the MPC.
Yeah.
Different angles. You want the team around you with different expertise.
Yeah.
In order to create.
Parallels are fantastic here, aren't they?
They are. And this is why actually these kinds of talks are so incredible because they are a reflection. So thanks, Morag. Thank you so much. And this is as I said, as I'm getting, for instance, I've been inside for 10 days. So actually, again, although I'm just dying to get out and do some gardening, it's actually also a good time to reflect.
Yeah.
So I think these parallels, and how I teach as well, I don't have one method. I look at the person in front of me and go, how best what can we formulate for them? And also the fact that education is, people are best engaged with when they don't know that they're learning.
Yep. I wanted to ask you about your experiences. You've mentioned homeschooling a few times, and I've been on my own journey with homeschooling my children as well, and I actually have one that's in school at the moment, one that's out of school, and it's been all over the joint, and I keep following their lead. And I wonder if I wasn't homeschooled myself. I went through the local primary school, I went to the local high school, and I went to the local university. That was my schooling. There was no question about it. That was just kind of what I did. So for you, having come through that homeschooling journey, as I'm listening to you saying, well, I just went and spoke to all the leading scientists and I connected this, and I was like, there's a homeschooler thinking, like the system thinking about, and not being stuck in a level like, well, this is me and I can't talk to that group. It's like, where do I need to go? Who do we need to talk to? What's the bigger picture here? And just drawing that in. And I wonder whether that's just you, or is that part of this thing of the kind of thinking that happens when you have the freedom to explore ideas so deeply as you do when you're homeschooled?
I think our family, there was a lot of trauma in our family that I'm working through, and the Heart Cutting Project is interestingly helping me work through. But I will say one of the good things around my parents was that they never if society said this is how you do it, they didn't go necessarily with that. So we were always kind of the special case. And I think that, there were good things and not so good things about that. However, I think it definitely instilled in me. I think there was, over time though, and as I've grown up, that has been a really positive thing in my life. where people have told me this is how you teach piano. I'm like, no, I don't believe that. Or this is how you build a. This is how you should do what we say. It's like, no, I respectfully disagree, and I'm going to go and find out, why, and back myself up on that. And I think that's been a really big thing. I think, homeschooling was one of those things. We did start off in primary school. I was bullied a lot, and so it wasn't a great time for me. But coming out, we did a lot of piano. We were able to do piano. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of time wasted in schools, and it's been a really great thing for my teaching, for my accompanying, for my piano playing. As far as being a teacher, I can actually present students with an alternative way of looking at things often, and they'll go, oh, really? You can do that? It's like, yeah. And, there's been interesting, So that is something I have started to unravel in myself. I'm sorry, it probably wasn't that clear, just because it's connected to a whole lot of trauma as well. Okay. But I think the good things have come out of that. And always good things can come out of it, always. It's just, So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're getting towards the end of our conversation, and there's so many things that I wanted to ask you. So two key things, three actually. One is, what are some of the key tips for people wanting to start it? Like, what are the things that people should be looking for in terms of a space to create a garden? Like, just some practical tips. Your book is full of these beautiful practical tips about, creating habitat or space or chemicals. What are some of the key, like if you were to run off, say, 5 key tips for people they should be looking for in finding a space or creating a garden, what do you think they would be? And also, how do they get access to your book would be the second part of that question.
Okay, so if we're talking street gardening, for me, street gardening is generally looking at the space outside of your home. So it can be other sites, but they do present more challenges possibly, and you need to be able to work, more with the community. So as far as nature strips go, it's pretty much the only public land where residents pretty much across the board in Australia are expected to do maintenance as well as council. So this is where your nature strip is, it's a great place to start. When you walk outside of the land that you're on, it does change a lot of things. So I think one of the biggest things to know when you start outside of your immediate home is that it's not your space. It's not your garden. It's everyone's garden. If you can think about it like that, you're going to be okay. Because it's actually less about the gardening skills that you have, and it's more about the mindset. So for me, having that determined and generous but community-centred mindset is absolutely key. And then you give the gardening a go. So that, for one thing, then I'd say, there are many challenges when you're working with the community, and this is always a great one. It's about dog poo. Holy moly, there's a lot of stuff around dog poo, and a lot of people get really, really annoyed about this. My big thing is, and it's kind of a metaphor for street gardening as well, is that pick it up and move on.
Great.
Try really hard not to get sucked into that, or putting up signs and saying, leave us alone, leave the thing alone. It's just doesn't work, because those people are not necessarily going to stop. They're probably going to keep going.
It's a little bit like the Take 3 for the Sea campaign, like you see it, just pick it up because it's going to make a difference. So you just do it. Yeah.
Yes.
Take 3 for the bees.
Yes, exactly. And I think the other thing is again, focus on the awesome, because there is so much amazing stuff that happens in tiny things. It can be a smile from a neighbor that you haven't had for 10 years. Or it can be someone leaving you a card. I don't think it's a tiny thing at all, actually, but someone leaving you a card in your letterbox. Someone going, can I help you? Mm. Someone stopping to say hello. Someone looking at, they might have their dog. Their dog might be used to, going to the toilet on the nature strip, and you now have the garden, and they go, we'll take them elsewhere. These are all small things, but this is the ripple effects of you walking outside and putting care into a strip outside. So this is what care is. If you do it with that caring attitude, you're going to be great. As far as the site itself, if we look, those are really important ones for me. But in an urban environment, sun is a really big issue, and I'm really quite new to this, so it took me a while to realise something. Obviously, very obvious around different seasons getting different amounts of sun, and of course, when you're looking at buildings, that changes again. So you're looking at your sun. Immersion is a good thing. It's not just site awareness, not looking at the site, it's being in the site and looking out, spending time in the site. Because these pieces of land get walked by, all the time. But to stop and stand and look, go, okay, we've got a tree. Okay, what's in the tree? How big is the tree? Where are the roots of the tree that you can see? Does water come through the tree? What is actually on the ground here? Is it compacted, or is it clay? Or is it someone's put cement there. Okay, so that's an interesting one. And you can start going, what are the plants that are there now? Is it a lawn? Is it capeweed? Is it, what have you got? And I think then if you also go, what nature is here apart from the plants? So what fauna is here? And you're looking at that. I think that's where you start getting
paying attention. Yeah, slowing down and paying attention. I think that's just... So has anyone been getting involved or sorry, I should start that again. What kind of advice would you give to people who are wanting to get involved, say, who are, they're in an apartment building, or they, have you thought about what you do in the Pollinator Corridor with people who have only got balconies or rooftops? Can they participate in it, or is it what do the bee experts say about layers in the city, vertical spaces?
So interesting. Well, as far as native bee research, there's not a whole lot. It's really starting to happen now. It kind of started happening around the same time I started street gardening. Well, it was there before, of course, but it really started amping up. So as far as vertical spaces, there's not a whole lot of research. There's so much research that can be done and will be in the MPC. So we're looking at biodiversity reports, but we also want to look at, for instance, how bees travel in an urban environment, how far do they go up? Does it depend on the size of the bee, for instance? Of course, native bee experts have their view, and they've kind of, they've said to me, look, I reckon second story, rooftop gardens, second story are probably, doable. But so, yeah, we're looking at that. Definitely on top of houses, in residential houses would be amazing. But yeah, there's so much. I mean, how do they cross roads? Do they cross roads? How far, how close to roads do they forage? And, there's a lot that actually isn't known. And this, hopefully, as we roll this out, genetic testing as well to see how far they are going. So there's been some research done in both green patches. There's so little, there's nothing in between.
Yeah. Oh, how fascinating.
So it's going to see how they...
Yeah.
Does it happen? Does it? How does it happen? When does it happen? What plants do we need to... We've got a plant list. It's in the book. And that was created with a wonderful specialist from Botanic Gardens, Neville Walsh, and many others. And he, this is just a starting list. Of course, local research says that Indigenous plants are best for Indigenous fauna. So we're doing Indigenous focused gardens. And so so we start with the best possible start, and then we'll tweak from there.
Yeah, fantastic. And so at the moment, you've got a crowdfunding campaign happening to support the launch of this project, really? Is that right?
Yeah.
So can you just tell us a bit about what that is and how people can jump on and find out more about that, and what is it that you need support for in doing this?
Absolutely. Well, we launched the crowdfund a couple of weeks ago. We're aiming big. Morag, we believe that communities should aim big, and we're going for $90,000, and that allows us to create 28 gardens of the 200. But it's not just the creation of the gardens that we want to do. It's also the maintenance. And that's such a huge thing because, of course, we can plant the plants, but if they don't flower, that's not good for the bees or any of the other critters that we want to attract. So we want to be able to have 2 years of maintenance and maintenance materials. We want biodiversity reports, First Nations consultations. So the more knowledge and the more awareness and the more connection we have to this land, the more power this project has to create positive change. And we're looking at creating 4 hubs of $22,500 each. And we're almost able to do one. So it's so fantastic. I think we're at almost 21,000. It's amazing.
Congratulations. That's so fantastic. How long is the campaign going for? How long have people got to donate into this?
We've got until August 12th. And I should say also that although obviously, we need donations of every size, every donation goes into a draw for some really cool prizes, actually. I've been working with a lot of local businesses here. So we've been doing that, and that's been really fun. Again,
I saw you do that the other day on was it like a reel or something, and you were pulling out prizes and people were winning things for donating. That was so fun.
It's been a lot of fun. And
do you know what that does though too, isn't it? Like it brings together all the different businesses. Like you're creating community in the process of doing that locally as well as getting that support more broadly. That's fantastic. Yeah.
The more I do this, the more I realise this is all about connection.
Yeah.
Connection at every different level.
You know what And what I really love about what you're doing too, and how you've explained all of these things you're doing, is that the kind of model that you're using can be adapted and applied to so many other different concepts. So maybe another pollinator project somewhere else, but maybe a completely other different sort of project, but taking that kind of community-led, bigger picture, connective thread weaving approach that you're taking to activate local dreams and rewilding different spaces and reimagining urban commons and, all of these different things. Like this approach, I think, is so incredibly powerful in bringing about positive change. So I hope people do get in and support you. Where do they find tell us what I'll put them down the notes too, but maybe just for people who are listening or out on a walk somewhere and want to type it in right now. What are your websites?
The website to go to will be theheartgardeningproject.org.au. And that will have all the links to the crowdfund. And that will also be, if you'd like to, purchase my book, that's also where you can do that. Although there are some other amazing places like Ceres and the Botanic Gardens, and that you can purchase the book as well.
Yeah, the book is fantastic, and I absolutely recommend anyone who's living, particularly in the Melbourne area.
Interestingly, people around Australia are buying it.
Oh, look, I can imagine, because
it seems like a lot of it's a lot of the information is transferable, which has been fantastic for me, because of course I wrote it for the NPC because that's what I could write. But yeah, it seems to be transferable.
Well, the whole process that you've talked about is relevant anywhere, really. It's just, people can adapt their local Indigenous plant lists and things like that, or find different partners that they want to work with. But the whole concept and the process and the structure and the thinking behind it all is applicable, everywhere beyond Australia. So thank you so much for taking the time to make that book, to put the photographs in it too are just beautiful. The examples that you show of these gardens are just, I think it's really important to see. I think it's important to see the possibilities and to show what a nature strip can really look like. I grew up in Melbourne and we always call the nature strips, but really they weren't nature strips, were they? They were just strips of, I don't know, sometimes grass, sometimes overtrodden bits of dirt. There's really not any nature going on there very much, except at a kind of a micro scale. So, these show the possibilities of what can be done in small, very highly urban environments. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining me today, Emma, and thank you for all this amazing leadership that you're bringing into this space and, transformation. We were going to try and meet when I was in Melbourne recently, but I got sick and then you got sick, and now, hopefully next time we'll be able to meet up, and I'd love to come around and see your gardens and catch up in person. That would be absolutely fantastic.
Oh, Morag, it's been so lovely talking to you. It's been really fantastic. And I think you've summed up so many of the things that I talk about so much better than me. So well done. And thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. And so I'll be sharing out all the links that Emma talked about. You can find them in the show notes. Follow it up. Make sure that you support the crowdfunder, and also, get a hold of the book. It is absolutely brilliant. Thank you again, Emma. It's a delight to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Morag.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning into this episode of Sense Making in a Changing World. I'm delighted to be able to share my conversation about the Heart Gardening Project and the Melbourne Pollinator Corridor with Emma Cutting with you. Remember, check out the show notes for more links and leave us a lovely review, and go ahead and subscribe so you receive notification of our weekly podcast episodes. Wishing you all the best. Take care. Stay safe.